Welcome back to Namaste Node.js. In this video, we are going to talk about thread pool. Inside libuv, we already saw in the last video about event loop, about callback queue, how event loop works. What are the different phases of event loop? We saw a lot of internal concepts that how actually callbacks are scheduled in the callback queue, and then those callbacks are picked by event loop, and then JavaScript engine executes those callbacks. We saw all that functionality, isn't it? We were talking a lot about event loop and callback queue in the previous episode. In this episode, we are going to talk about thread pool. Why does libuv needs a thread pool? And we will also answer the most famous interview question, which is Node.js single threaded or multi-threaded? Right? So that's a very famous question. We will answer this today in this episode. Okay? Before I talk about thread pool, okay, first of all, there are few things which were left to discuss inside event loop. Let me finish them first. There are few topics just which were left in the last video. Now in this episode, I am going to cover a little bit of event loop, then we'll move on to thread pool. Okay. So in the last video, I already told you about these phases of the phases of event loop. We saw that, okay, there is process.nextTick and promise callback, and this cycle happens before every phase, right? Before starting the every phase, these process.nextTick and promise callbacks are checked, and all these things we studied, isn't it? Now, what we will do is, now, in the last video, I told you that there are 4 phases, right? I told you there are 4 phases. But let me tell you that when you will actually see the event loop on the official documentation, there are more than 4 phases, right? There are more than 4 phases. These are the 4 phases I showed you so that your understanding becomes easier. Understanding of event loop becomes easier. So these are the main 4 phases. There are a little more phases, right? So the best way to learn is to go to the documentation. So if you'll go to the Node.js official website, and if you will go and read about the Node.js event loop, you will just see the diagram. Okay. So I already told you about timers, right? There is a timer phase. I told you about poll phase. I told you about check phase, and I told you about the close phase. But there are 2 more phases in between, as stated by the official Node.js document, right? These are pending callback and ideal and prepare. Okay, so what are these 2 phases? And if you will see, these phases occur in a sequence: timer, then pending callback, then idle and prepare, then poll, then check, then close callback, and then this loop goes once again to the timers. Got it? And we already know that incoming connections, data, etc. come via poll phase. Right? We have seen all this, right? We have already seen all this. Let me just zoom a little so that it is much more visible. So we have seen all this. We have not seen this pending callback phase and idle prepare phase. So what is pending callback phase and idle prepare phase? Let me tell you. Suppose if there are some callbacks, okay, so let us just read over here, right? It will make more sense. Executes IO callbacks which are deferred to the next loop iteration. So whenever there are IO callbacks, right? So IO callbacks are handled by poll. So suppose over there, for any reason, these IO callbacks can be deferred to the next event loop cycle. So suppose if there is some error, right? Suppose you want to retry something, right? Or if any reason, there can be multiple reasons why we want to defer the execution of these IO callbacks, right? Sometimes the case could be starvation. Right? What happens is you cannot starve the queue. All these, we feel that, okay, the logic which I told you is a very easy logic. No, it has lot more complexity. There is a way that these queue can starve, right? Suppose, see, a lot of recursive call started happening inside this poll queue, right? So, but there is a limit, right? Otherwise the other queues will starve. So what happens to reduce starvation? There are a lot of, sometimes we defer these callbacks also. Okay. Sometimes we defer these callback to the next queue, right? Next cycle of the queue. So in that case, there is a phase which is known as pending callbacks. So suppose if there are some pending callbacks, so it can happen in the next cycle. So suppose if there are some IO callbacks which are pending, which will not executed in the poll phase, they can be executed in this pending callback phase. That is where this phase is. This is not a very important phase. That is why I did not make it over here. But after the close phase, sorry, not after the close phase, after the timer phase, that phase comes over here, right? Somewhere over here is the pending callback phase, right? Basically, if there are some IO callbacks which needs to be handled in poll phase, but it did not handle, so it can be handled in the next tick. What is a tick? One tick of the event loop is known as, one cycle of the event loop is known as tick. Okay, so note down this thing, tick. One full cycle, one cycle is known as tick of event loop, TICK. Okay, TICK, it is known as one tick. Got it? So now, if you will read the documentation, right, it will make sense, right? Now it will make sense. Executes IO callback deferred to the next loop iteration. Okay, so whatever callbacks are deferred to the next loop iteration, that will happen in the other phase. Okay, in the next tick, sorry, next loop iteration. Now, there is one more phase, idle and prepare phase. Now this phase, if you will read, it is used only internally. So basically, we as developers don't need to take care of anything. There are some idle prepare checks which which basically Node.js or libuv library is doing while it is running the event loop. So these are idle prepare checks. So but we as developer don't need to take care of it, right? So that is why it's not that important for us. The most important phase in the event loop is the poll phase, which we should be worrying about, which we should be concerned about. Okay, so why I am showing you all this is, so suppose if you will go to Node official documentation, go read everything about event loop, right? I would encourage my students, I would encourage all of you who are watching these videos to go to this website, read about event loop, right? When I have explained you all these concepts, right? When I have explained you all these concepts, these things will make so much sense to you. If you would have read this earlier, it would have been very complex for you. You won't understand by reading just this documentation. It is very complex, right? It also took me a tough time to read and understand all of it. But once I have explained you the logic, once I have explained you this diagram, now it will make sense. Now everything will make sense over here. Okay, so please read this. I would want you to read this up. Now, one more thing I wanted to tell you is that if you will go to libuv, right, you will see another diagram of event loop. Okay, now you will say, Akshay, you showed us this diagram. Now you are saying that, okay, Node's official diagram is this. Now, if you will go to libuv, right, this is the libuv official website. And over here, if you will go and see the IO loop, right, this is the event loop, right? This is the IO loop. This is the event loop. Okay, IO or event loop is the central part of libuv, right? And if you'll see this diagram, this is much more complex than what it is there, right? But at the end of the day, whatever I told you, just remember this and your life will be sorted. Okay, just remember what I told you. It works like this, and before every cycle, it just goes over here, right? So this is what I wanted to say. If you will go over here, you will mess up your head, right? But I would request you all to go to these, right? Once you have understood this diagram, when I showed you, now go to this and read it up, right? Your understanding will become very strong, right? And if you will go to libuv documentation and read it, then your understanding will become even one more level deep. See, if you will read from the Node.js documentation, you will understand the event loop. But actual implementation of event loop is done by whom? The actual implementation of event loop inside the Node.js is done by libuv library. So libuv library, this diagram is the most accurate and fundamental representation of event loop. But this diagram has a lot of extra things, right? This diagram has a lot of extra things, and it is kind of like a dummy code, right? So that is why this diagram looks like this. So just read about it. You will understand what is happening over here, and this will make your understanding even more clear, right? Earlier, when I was preparing for this episode, right? When I was preparing for the event loop episode, I thought that, okay, let me explain this diagram. But I felt as a teacher that it will be very, very, very complex if I start explaining all of this. Right? It will be very, very, very complex. So that is why I did not touch this diagram. I made my own diagram, right? And this diagram works the best, right? It will make your understanding very clear. So remember this diagram and then just go through these theory, right? Everything will make sense to you. Right? Now if you will see, it is doing one and the same thing, right? Basically, it is initializing the loop time. Now, if I have to explain all of this, if I start explaining, it will take 1 more hour. But I am just quickly going through this. So basically, see, it basically initializes the loop, right? And then it runs the timers, and now it just keeps checking in, right? That whether the loop is alive or not, right? Then it will call the pending callbacks, right? Now you know the pending callbacks, right? In this phase, it will call all the pending callbacks which were pending from the last iteration of the cycle, right? Suppose in the last iteration, if there was something pending, so it will go over here and execute them. Then it checks, then it run the idle handles, then it run the prepare handles. So basically these two are the internal phases, right? You don't have to worry much about it, right? It is basically like event loop is preparing to run the IO. So it does some checks, it does some calculations, right? And then it starts the poll phase. So basically, I told you, right? Poll phase is a very complex phase, right? Poll phase handles most of the events, right? So that is why IO events. So that is why there is some calculations, there is some checks which event loop does before entering into the poll phase. So basically this run idle handles, run prepare handles, you can assume that it is preparing for the poll phase, right? Then it goes to the actual poll phase, it runs all of them, right? Then after running the poll phase, it again checks the handle, right? Run check handles. So check handles over here, it runs any set immediate if it is there, right? This is the check phase which is running the set immediate. After set immediate, what happens? This is the close phase where you close. Suppose if you have some callbacks associated to closing the sockets or something like that, so it handles over here. Now it updates the loop time and it runs the due timers and then it goes on again, right? So this is how this loop works. So if you will see clearly, this is also doing the same thing which I explained you over here, right? So I would request you to go ahead and read this up, right? Read this and try to understand it. This is one more level deep and it will just help you, right? And just be curious, right? Why not? I had curiosity. I went and read a lot of things. It is very interesting. I told you, right? I let me give you a homework, okay? So in the diagram, I showed you that, okay, event loop waits. Right? Event loop waits at the poll phase. I told you, right? Event loop goes on. But when it is idle, then it will wait on the poll phase. This is what I told you in the last video. Can you tell me, this is your homework, find out that how do you identify that event loop waits, right? Where in the code it is written that event loop will wait? Where in the code it is written? Okay, first of all, let me show you the code, right? So let me just dive deep. This is what, sometimes me as a teacher, I get very confused that how much should I tell you? Because if you will go one level deep, there is so much thing inside working that it will be very complex for me to understand. So I keep a balance that I go deep, you should have in-depth knowledge, but then it should not be so complex that you don't understand, right? I want to make the deeper level concepts easier for you, but not at the cost of that you don't understand anything, okay? So there is a balance that I keep in my teaching style. So this is what I am keeping right now. But still, I want all the curious developers who are watching this video to go to the libuv documentation, right? Now, if you will go to the libuv documentation, right? Over here, go to SRC folder. In the SRC folder, you will find that there are Unix and Windows, right? There are two folders, Unix and Windows. Go to any folder. Let me go to Unix folder. Over here, you will find core.c file. Core.c. This is the core C file, right, of the event loop. Inside this file, you will find event loop. And what actually is event loop? What actually is event loop? Let me tell you, there is a function which is known as uv underscore run. Where is it? uv underscore run. There might be some function. See, this is the uv underscore run. This is the function where you will see the event loop, my dear friends. This is the function which is executing your event loop. We draw fancy diagrams, right? We draw these fancy diagrams and everything. These are just for our visual representation. This is how our human mind works. Our human mind works in form of images. When I show you such images, right? When I show you such images, the concept gets settled into your head. But I don't want to keep you far from reality. You should know in reality, event loop is not these diagrams or some time, there are no phases or something. At the end of the day, it is just some piece of code, my dear friend. It's just a C language code. See, core.c, this is C language code. What is event loop? This is event loop. And if you are curious, you can go and read the code of event loop. What it is doing? It is actually a loop. See this? This while loop that you see, is a event loop. Got it? People ask me, what is event loop? This is event loop, that is event loop, this is event loop. This while loop, at the end of the day, if you go to the code level, you will see that this event loop is the while loop. This is the knowledge I want all the Namaste Node.js students should have. Go read it up. If you are curious, go read the code. You will understand everything. If you will see the code also, see this is UV run. So now if you will see, let's start the event loop. See, the event loop starts. Now you will see the phases also. Okay, you will see the phases also. See, run timers. Do you see this? Initially, you are running the timers, right? You will see a timer phase. Okay, and you will see this while loop. So now you will see all these things, right? All these phases that you saw, right? You will see, this is the libuv diagram and this is the libuv code. This diagram exactly matches this code, right? If you will see this diagram, it will exactly matches this code. Let me just show it to you. Let me make it like this. And let me just take you over here. Okay, let me show it to you, right? Now let me just take some time and show it to you. I know, right? It is taking a lot of time, but let me just quickly show it to you. For the people who are interested, I just want to give them a little push, right? Because unless some people, some developers they are just afraid of reading documentation, reading code, but I want your fear to be gone, right? This is the uv underscore run. This is the uv run function. Just read this uv run function, okay? So what it is doing is initialize the loop time. So it is initializing the loop time, right? UV update time. Now it will run the due timers. So it is running the timers. It is updating the time and updating the timers. Now it starts the loop. Over here, it starts the loop. Over here, this loop is alive. So it will check for this condition. So I told you, right? It is a semi-infinite loop. It waits at the poll stage. Isn't it? That is your homework. I will not tell you in the code where is that waiting thing, right? But it checks that, okay, it can sleep or not, right? It calculates whether the sleep or not. And when does it sleep? See, you got the answer already. When the UV queue is empty, right? The queues are empty, right? So that is when it can sleep, okay? Now, if it does not sleep, so it will call the pending callbacks. Do you see this? UV run pending, and then it passes in this loop, right? UV run pending. This is the function. If you can go to this function and you can also see this function is in this file. You can go and read the code of this UV run pending function also. I am not showing it to you right away, right? Because otherwise it will take a lot of time to explain all these internal things. If you want me to make a video on it, maybe I will make some deep dive video on this on my YouTube channel or something. But I want to keep it light for all, because see, these videos are being watched by all level of people. Some people might want to go into it, some people might not want to go into it, but if you are curious, please go read about everything, because this code is huge, right? See how it is running the pending callback, right? So it is running these pending callbacks, right? Then see UV run idle, UV run prepare. So it is running the idle handles, it is running the prepare handles. Now what it will do, now it is calculating the timeout. See, I told you, right? Before it goes to the poll phase, it calculates, how to explain you, see, I'll tell you, let me try to tell you. See, libuv, suppose if you schedule a timer, so libuv knows that, okay, there is a timer which is ticking and it can expire, right? After, suppose if you ran a set timeout with 5 seconds. So libuv knows that, okay, 5 seconds, the timer will be there, and after 5 seconds the timer will expire. So libuv calculate the time that, okay, if there is nothing available in my all the callback queues, so for 5 seconds I have at least 5 seconds when I can wait in the IO poll queue. So now I know it can be a little complex, but let me see, if you don't listen to me very carefully, I can explain you that also, how it calculates. See, it goes to the timer phase. It knows that what all set timers are expiring, right? Suppose if there are 2 timers, one is 5 seconds, one is 10 seconds, okay? There is a timer for 5 seconds, there is a timer for 10 seconds. So it will see what is the latest timer, right? Basically, which timer, suppose if there are 3 timers, A, B, C. This is 5 seconds, this is 7 seconds, this is 10 seconds. So it will find out which is the timer which will expire the earliest, right? So timer A with 5 seconds will expire the earliest, right? So if all the callback queues are empty, and there is a timer of 5 seconds which will run after 5 seconds, so libuv internally calculates that, okay, in the poll phase I can wait for 5 seconds, right? Only after 5 seconds I need to go and run the timer. So basically libuv, before even going to the poll phase, calculates that how much time I have that I can stay in the poll and I can just keep polling events. Got it? Let me repeat it once again. So what libuv tries to do is, before going on to poll phase, as the poll phase is the most important phase, right? It just, because see, there are so many incoming requests that can come inside the poll phase, because poll phase is mostly used. So before going on to poll phase, it actually calculates that what is the timer, if there is some timer which I need to execute, right? And if it takes 5 seconds, then I can wait over here for 5 seconds. Suppose if there is 10 seconds for the timer to be left, so poll can wait here for 10 seconds, right? Once the 10 seconds are expired, then only it can go to timer and then come back to poll again. That is why it waits over here. So it calculates it, right? So I know I have not explained it thoroughly and in detail, but I would request you to please go read all of this, read the code. You will understand all whatever I am saying. Right? Now it goes to the IO poll, right? So it goes to the poll phase. Now see, again and run the check handle, close callback. See, if you will go over here, it runs the check handle, right? Then it runs the closing handles, right? Check phase over here, if you will go and see this, all the set immediate callbacks will run over here, right? In this check. Then closing handles, right? Closing handles, right? It will run the close handles. Then it will update the loop time, right? Update loop time. Then it will run any pending timers if there's there. And then the while loop will continue once again, right? And then it will check if the loop is alive or the loop is not alive, right? And then it will just run once again. So this is the while loop. This is the whole while loop which is running in, right? So this, my dear friends, is event loop at the end of the day. Hope you are enjoying this, right? So I want all my students to know this, right? Note down this path. If you can't find it, go to libuv. It is very easy, right? Go to source, go to Unix, go to core.c, right? You will find all of it. Try to read it, right? It will be amazing. Okay, so let's move ahead now. I wanted to explain you and show you all these things because these are very important. Event loop is the core fundamental part of the libuv, and libuv is the superhero, right? Libuv is the core part of Node.js. Without event loop, Node.js cannot exist. All the asynchronous task, all the non-blocking IO happens because of event loop. Okay, this is the major thing that you need to understand, and let's move ahead now. Now let's move to the thread pool. I told you that in libuv there is a thread pool. What is this thread pool? When libuv uses this thread pool is the question, and then we will answer the most famous question: is Node.js single threaded or multi-threaded? Okay, so now you already know a concept that, okay, whenever there is an async task, so V8 engine offloads it to libuv. Basically, libuv handles that task, right? What kind of task can be there? Suppose there is a fs.any function, right? You are reading a file system, right? Suppose if you are making an API call, you are doing http.get, right? Or you are making a DNS call, or you are making a crypto, right? You are generating a password hash, and so many more functions are there. So many more utilities, modules are there, which are offloaded to libuv. Now, for some of these complex tasks, let me take an example. Okay, suppose if you want to read a file, you cannot read a file in this thread. Why? Otherwise, it will block our main thread, right? We cannot block our main thread. So what happens is, whenever there is a file read needs to happen, it offloads, VH engine offloads it to libuv. Now what libuv does is, it finds a thread inside the thread pool. It has a thread pool, right? It gets a thread and it runs the file system, right? It runs the file access system using this thread pool. Understood or not? Right? Let me explain you once again. See, libuv has a thread pool. Now, whenever you read a file, so libuv says, okay, libuv basically uses this thread pool to request the file. Got it? It cannot do manually. Similarly, libuv, see, suppose if you are doing any crypto, right? We saw a crypto function, right? Suppose if you are calculating, see, crypto functions are huge in itself, right? Basically, they are complex algorithm which needs to run. Suppose if you are encrypting a password, it takes a lot of efforts, right? So you cannot do that on the main thread. So we don't do this on the main thread. We don't want to block it. So we offload it to libuv, and libuv uses one of these thread pool to implement crypto. So what happens is, let me tell you, right? Let me tell you that, see, suppose if you are making an FS call, so it goes to the thread pool, and this thread pool basically makes this request to the OS, and then the file is read, and then the thread pool returns back, and the thread is available. Thread is then vacant. See, while the file is reading, this thread is completely occupied. It cannot do anything else. So when this file reading is complete, so now the thread pool, like that thread which is like engaged, it just frees up. Then it is available for some other operation. Okay. Now, similarly, suppose if you are doing a crypto, right? You are hashing a password. So this crypto will again go check the thread pool, occupy a thread, and then runs it in the thread, right? Because see, what is a thread? Thread is basically, you can assume that, okay, it's a container where you can run some piece of code, and if you want to block the thread, block it. If you want to block that thread, block it, because if you block this thread, then it will not block our main thread, right? Our main thread will be safe. So it has a thread pool. The crypto happens over here. The file system call happens over here. It talks to the OS. Got it? So there are some functions for which libuv uses a thread pool. Because libuv will, how will libuv do, right? Suppose if there is a file system read which is coming up, so it takes a thread and it says that, okay, read the file. Suppose if there is one more file system call comes in, right? Suppose if there is one more file system call comes in. Now what happens? It will take another thread, it will occupy another thread, and this thread will make a file system call. Suppose if another file system thread came in, right? So it will take another thread, it will occupy another thread and will make a call to system, OS. Suppose, so now let me tell you one more thing. In Node.js, the size of the thread pool is 4 by default. 4 threads, right? This is known as UV threads, right? 4, right? The size is 4. Let me write it down properly, right? The UV thread pool, it is known as like this, right? Thread pool size is equals to 4. UV thread pool size is equal to 4 by default, right? There are 4 threads over here by default. So basically inside the libuv, there are 4 threads by default. Okay, suppose if there are 5 file reading calls I made simultaneously. Suppose if I make the 5 file reading calls simultaneously, what will happen? So see, let me just explain you with the help of diagram. See, one file call, it occupied one thread. Another file system call, it occupied second thread. Another file system call, it occupied this thread. Another file system call, it occupied the fourth thread. Now what happens? Another file system call comes in. Now it will have to wait for one of the thread to be empty. Right? It will not be handled immediately. So whenever there is an operation which needs a thread, so it takes a thread, does its job, and then frees up the thread. Right? And then the next call can be can use that resource, right? Can use that thread. Right? This is how libuv uses the thread pool. Okay. Otherwise there is no way that using just one thread you can do all of it. Right? In the main thread, we don't block it. Right? All the asynchronous tasks are done by libuv using a thread pool, or sometimes not using a thread pool. I will come on to that later, but it uses a thread pool for a lot of things. Let me tell you an example. So when does libuv uses a thread pool? Whenever you do something like fs, you do fs.read file, right? So it uses a thread pool. If you do fs. There are more functions, right? So it in the fs module, it majorly always uses a thread pool. Okay, it goes to thread pool, and then thread pool will make a file call, gets back again. Got it? For DNS.lookup, see, there is a module which is known as DNS, right? So in DNS module, not for the other functions, but specifically for lookup function, right? This DNS.lookup, right? So basically, suppose if you want to look up, right? Domain name servers. So DNS means domain name servers. Read more about it. Read more about DNS.lookup method. You will understand what it is. But for DNS.lookup method, it is a complex heavy operation. So it uses this thread and then checks on the internet for the DNS lookup, right? There is a get addr info, right? Method which is called. So it's complex, right? Again, just look up on the internet and you will find what is the use of DNS.lookup. For the crypto methods, so suppose if there is a crypto dot, remember we did a crypto dot pbk password based key hashing function 2, right? pbkhf2, right? If you do pbkhf2 function, this also uses a thread pool, right? This function also uses a thread pool, and then it runs over here because it's very complex, right? It can block a thread. It is a heavy operation. And sometimes there are some user specified input. or some C++ code that needs to be run. So that things are offloaded to thread pool by libuv. Okay, so this is how thread pool works. Now, I will show you an example also of the thread pool, right? In the VS Code, first of all. And by default, this size is 4. You should know this. Now, okay, now you have enough knowledge, right? Answer me this question, that is Node.js single-threaded or multi-threaded? Tell me. Is Node.js single-threaded or multi-threaded? Some people say it's single-threaded, some people say multi-threaded. But you, my Node.js developer friend, right? You, all the students of Namaste Node.js, you should know the exact explanation of it. Right? So you should ask the question, if somebody asks you is Node.js single-threaded or multi-threaded, then you should ask when. If you are just giving it synchronous code, then Node.js is single-threaded because it can run everything in a single thread. But if suppose you are doing something that needs to use libuv, and that too something among all of it, then it becomes multi-threaded and it can use the UV thread pool. Now, why I am again and again saying UV thread pool? Because these 4 threads are separately kept by libuv, right? These 4 thread pool. See, there are so many threads. There can be so many threads in a computer. At OS level, there are so many threads which can happen, right? There are so many threads which are there. But there is a thread pool which is just allocated by UV, right? That UV is managing this thread pool, and this thread pool is size is 4. So that is why I am again and again saying UV thread pool. So always whenever you say libuv, whenever you are talking about libuv, so always say that the thread pool size of UV thread pool is 4. Okay, you should know that lingo. Now, Node.js is single-threaded when you are passing it synchronous code, right? Then it works like a normal JavaScript, right? JavaScript is a synchronous single-threaded language. We all know. What does it mean? It just has a one call stack. It can just execute one line at a time. This V8 engine is single-threaded, right? But in libuv, we have a thread pool, and if required, we can use multiple threads if required. So the answer is, libuv is single-threaded or multi-threaded? It depends. The answer is it depends. It's not just a yes or no. Okay, that it is a multi-threaded or not a multi-threaded, single-threaded or not a single-threaded. The answer is not a one word. It's a phrase that it depends how you are using Node.js, when you are using Node.js, what code are you running on Node.js. It totally depends on all of it, that it's a single-threaded or multi-threaded. So this is a very famous interview question. But if you have all this knowledge, you can just go and answer it with confidence in your interviews. Because see, the interviewer asks you this question. Is it single-threaded, multi-threaded? If you will say single-threaded or if you will say multi-threaded, interviewer is just going to grill you up. And you should be prepared with all your answers, right? Because you actually know how things work behind the scenes inside Node.js. Nobody can stop you in the interviewer, right? So you can debate with the interviewer, you can talk to the interview, you can give your conclusion, you can tell them how Node.js works behind the scenes if this question is asked. Okay? Any student of Namaste Node should not fail a interview of Node, right? Because they don't understand all of it. Understand it and become a very good candidate for interviews. Go at great companies and make me feel proud, my dear students. Okay? So, hope you would have understood it. Now is the time that I should show you a demo, a code demo of thread pool. Okay? Shall I show you the code demo of thread pool? Okay, let me just show it to you. So over here, I have this thread pool file. Let me close this event loop files. Okay, so we have these thread pool files. So I told you that, okay, whenever you do a fs.read file, whenever you do a crypto.pbkd f2 function, what happens is it uses a thread pool. It uses a thread pool. How can I show you? Let me show it to you. Let me first of all comment this up, right? I just want to show you one thing, okay? Okay, let me just run these two functions. Okay, now let me show you how it runs, right? Just see the behavior of the program. Node threadpool.js. See this, it waits for it because it takes time, and then suddenly both of them comes in. How did both of them come at the same time? See this, the answer of both of them comes in the same time. How? How? Both of them were executed at the same time. How? Because these two calls were offloaded to libuv, and libuv assigned a thread to the first crypto.pvk2sdo. So one thread was assigned to this and one thread was assigned to this. Suppose if there are more calls, suppose if there are 4 calls, right? Suppose if there are 4 calls, let me write down the same thing, 3 and this is 4. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Got it? Now what will happen? Run this code. See, now they are waiting. All these 4 are done at the same time. Or these 4 are done at the same time. Now if you will keep running it, you will see that the order of their execution can also differ. See this. See this. Earlier it was 4, 1, 2, 3. It is 4, 2, 3, 1. Why it is happening? You know, right? Because you are making a crypto call. So the first crypto call is assigning to this thread. The second one assigning to this thread. The third one assigning to this thread. The fourth one assigning to this thread. Whatever thread returns the answer first, right? Whatever threads returns the answer first will win, right? Will be executed fast. So the order of execution is not guaranteed over here. And it uses the 4th thread over here. That is why the result is coming in the same order. What if I do 5, right? Let us make 5 calls now. Let me make 5 calls now. Now it will be interesting. Now you observe what happens, because now I am exceeding my thread pool, isn't it? Now I am exceeding my thread pool. So if I go over here, see this. Now 4 crypto calls came in. The 5th one is still waiting. Do you see? The 5th one took time. Let me show it to you once again. Okay. Let me show it to you once again. Let me clear the console. Just see it once again. The 4 will run automatically. See, the 4 output came in quickly. 1, 4, 3, 2. The 5th came after some time. Why it happened like this? Because there are 4 threads. When you ran this piece of code, all the 4 libuv threads were blocked. Do you see this? The thread size is 4. So all the 4 threads were blocked by this. And the 5th call was waiting for a thread to be empty. The 5th was waiting for the thread to be empty. Now let me tell you one interesting thing. So the thread pool size is 4 by default. But can you change the size of the thread pool? The answer is yes. You can change the size of the thread pool. How? By a variable which is known as process.env.uv thread pool size. Okay, so let me just show it to you. If you do process.env.uv underscore thread pool size underscore size, and you give it some thread pool size. Okay, so suppose instead of by default 4, let me make it 2. Okay, let us restrict it. So now see the behavior of these calls, right? So now let me show you the behavior of these calls. Run the Node.js thread pool. See this. 2 are done, right? The thread pool size is only 2 now. See, it will do 2 by 2 by 2. See this. It took a lot of time to execute. Now, suppose in your production system, if you have a heavy operation, suppose if there are a lot of file handling happening inside your production system, so you need to alter your thread pool size accordingly, right? You can alter your thread pool size accordingly. You can increase this thread pool size to a lot of threads, right? I can make 8 threads. Even 1024 threads also I can make, right? I can make a lot of threads. Okay, so suppose if I did this as 8, so you need to increase your thread pool size, right? If you need to do a lot of things concurrently. So suppose if your server needs to do a lot of file operations, or if a server needs to do a lot of work which is done on the thread pool, then you can increase the thread pool size as well. Got it? If there is a lot of congestion happening. This is what I wanted to explain you. So now we have seen that, okay, libuv has an event loop, libuv has a callback queue, libuv has a thread pool, and basically when you make a fs call, so it uses a thread pool and go over here. When it make a event call, then it goes over here. Right? But remember that it is only used for these things. Now what happens? Now I have to explain you one more cool thing, right? So suppose if you have a server and there are a lot of incoming requests, right? Suppose if the if there are incoming requests coming in. What do you mean by incoming request? Suppose if you are running a web server and there are some users who are hitting your APIs, right? There are some users who are hitting your APIs. So how does this API uses a thread pool? The answer is no. The answer is no. So it uses, so let me explain it to you. Now I'll have to go one level deeper to explain you this, right? Let me explain you quickly. Okay, let me go over here. So in the libuv library, how does it interact with OS? We will have to understand, right? Suppose if you have to do any sort of networking, right? Whenever you do some networking in server, so it is done on sockets. Okay, right? All the networking happens on sockets, right? There are different sockets, all the connections. So basically how it happens, right? Suppose if a user is requesting something from your API, so it is making a connection, right? TCP connection, right? So it is requesting you to make a connection. Now you need a socket for a connection, incoming request, right? It is an incoming request, you need a socket over here. Now each socket, suppose if there are multiple users coming in, multiple incoming requests, so there are different socket. Each socket has a socket descriptor. Socket descriptor. It is also known as file descriptor, right? So it has nothing to do with file system or something, but it is just known as FDS, file descriptor. I don't know why it is known as file descriptor, but that is how it is known as file descriptor. It's a socket descriptor. So basically you have multiple sockets, right? There are multiple sockets for incoming requests. Now what happens is, what used to happen was, one thing you can do is, see, suppose if you have an incoming request, right? There is an incoming request on this socket. Now, incoming request. Now suppose you want to write some data in this connection. You want to write some data, okay? There is an incoming request and you want to, there is a connection, right? This is the connection which is made, right? One connection. Suppose if you want to write some data, that means now this is a blocking operation, right? This is a blocking operation. Now, meanwhile you are writing the data, you cannot do anything on that thread, right? See, you have a thread where you are making a connection, right? So suppose this is a socket, right? Now in this connection, you cannot do anything if you are writing the data into this socket, right? Suppose if there is an API call which came in and you want to send some data. So meanwhile, you cannot handle multiple requests at the same time. To handle that, you need a thread. So what happens? You create a thread and then this is the thread for this connection. Suppose if there are multiple connections, so you might need multiple threads, right? So suppose if there are concurrently thousands of users coming in, so will you make 1,000 threads? Will you make 1,000 threads? The answer is no. That is what Node.js does not do. Instead, how does this scenario handled is using a system, right? Inside our operating system, there is something known as ePOL. ePOL is a scalable IO event notification mechanism. Okay, let me explain you what is ePOL. But you understood, right? That I cannot. So there is a model. That model is known as thread per connection. Thread per connection. And thread per connection. So suppose if there are 1,000 people coming simultaneously, there are 1,000 incoming concurrent requests. So there will be 1,000 threads occupied. Right? Now our systems have become very capable. Now a system, if you will take a Linux system or something, it has a good RAM, then it can handle a lot of threads, right? It can handle 10, 20,000 threads also. But let me tell you that making one thread per connection, okay, one thread per connection is not a good idea, right? It's not a good idea. This is known as thread per connection model. This is known as thread per connection. So suppose there are so many concurrent requests, so each of them is assigned their own thread. So basically you can assume that, okay, if there are 10 users coming to your website, all of these 10 users have blocked one thread in your system and they are doing read and write through that connection. Got it? So this idea is not a very good idea. There is a different idea which is known as ePOL. Okay, this ePOL and KQ. So basically these are the same algorithm, right? Similar kind of an algorithm. There is separate for Windows also. So this ePOL is an algorithm which is used in Linux. KQ is used in macOS. So basically this is a scalable IO event notification mechanism. What does it mean? Let me tell you. Okay, so whenever you have a socket, right? There is a connection request coming in, right? There is a connection request. So what will happen is there is a socket, there is a, you call it as socket descriptor, but it is known as FDS, file descriptor, or a socket descriptor you can call it as. So there is a file descriptor. Suppose if there are multiple connections coming in, so each of them has a socket description, FDS file descriptors. So what happens is you can create a ePOL descriptor, right? It is tough for me also to explain. You can create a ePOL descriptor. Now this ePOL descriptor will basically is a collection of your socket descriptors. So basically one ePOL descriptor can handle multiple connections, right? Assume that one ePOL descriptor can handle multiple connections. Got it? And see, I know it can be complex. Let me try to explain it to you once again from the scratch, okay? I know this can be complex. You'll have to go to OS level to explain you this. See, inside your operating system, there is a hardware, right? Hardware. On top of your hardware, there is a kernel, right? There is a kernel. And on top of your kernel runs the processes, right? Whatever the processes you run, even the Node.js and all of that runs inside a process, right? It's a process. These are processes. Now, you need to talk to kernel, right? At the kernel level, these are the ePOL and KQ mechanisms are there. So basically in your operating system at the kernel level, you have this scalable IO notification mechanism, so that basically you create a ePOL descriptor, right? One ePOL descriptor can have multiple file descriptor. Now, suppose if a connection is made, it is not that, okay, it is not that it is always writing to that connection, right? Sometimes the connection is just made and the connection is just holding over there and it is waiting for read or write, isn't it? Suppose if there is no read or write going on that connection, so it is just waiting idle. So what it will do, there will be a ePOL descriptor and it will manage a lot of connections, right? It will manage a lot of connections. Now, because this is a notification management system, so as soon as any activity happens on any of the connection, it will notify the libuv. So basically this libuv uses ePOL, and as soon as anything happens in any of the connection, anything happens in any of the connection, it will notify the libuv, and this libuv will take care of it using the event loop and then execute it into V8 engine. Now, it is complex to explain. Let me explain it to you once again. Suppose if there are multiple requests coming in, right? There are different socket descriptors. There is an ePOL descriptor. ePOL will manage all of it, right? ePOL will manage all these connections. As soon as there is activity, if there is some activity in one of these, right? In one of these connections. So what will happen? ePOL will notify libuv, and then libuv will call in the poll phase. It will send a callback, and that callback will be like checked by the event loop, and the code will be executed in the V8 engine. So basically, this is how your whole API flow works. Got it? It's very tough to explain because see, I am just going layer deep, right? There is a Node.js. Inside Node.js, you have libuv. Inside libuv, you have a thread pool, an event loop, and all of that. And libuv also interacts with operating system in ePOL, right? So I would suggest you, okay? So just for curiosity, I wanted to tell you that, okay, how it happens at the operating system level. It uses ePOL and KQ mechanisms, right? It's a scalable IO event notification mechanism. Read about it. Read more about it. You will understand the beauty that how complex systems are. And if you ask me, I am also not an expert in all of this, right? If I try to explain you the mechanisms of ePOL and KQ, I might also fail because I personally don't know how these ePOL and KQ actually works at a deeper level. I want to learn that. And whenever I will get time, sometime I will go and learn this. But I am curious to at least go and read about it. You know, I can explain you how ePOL works in a theoretical way, but I have not explored and dived deep into ePOL a lot. I know basically from the top level hierarchy that, okay, what does ePOL do? But internally, I don't know that how ePOL is, like how we are interacting with the kernel and all that stuff. Right? So now, when we say that, okay, libuv is written in C language, right? This libuv is written in C language. So basically this C code is interacting with this ePOL mechanism. This C language is interacting with this ePOL mechanism. And you know, if you want, you can also write your C code to do all these things. To tell the operating system to open a socket, receive what we do, right? When we create a web server, we open a socket, right? We create a socket and then we listen to it, right? We listen to it. And then as soon as we start listening to it, now anybody can make a connection with us, right? Now we are accepting the connections. So when we are accepting the connection, then we will need to deal with the socket descriptors, the ePOL and all these mechanisms comes in over there. Right? So just be curious, my dear friends, all my fellow students, just be curious. If you are interested, go read more about it. Even if you don't know the internals of how ePOL works, even I don't know that. If you don't know it, that's okay. But at least know what is ePOL and KQ. Okay? Can you do that? Take it down as your homework. You will have to study that how ePOL and KQ kind of works. What are they? What do you mean by scalable IO event notification mechanism? See, this name itself is sufficient to tell you what it is doing. But I'm just saying that, okay, go read more about it. Keep your curiosity alive. I want all my students to be curious. You know, I am what I am because I was curious. Right? If you are curious, you can do a lot of things. Being curious has helped me in my life a lot, right? I'm curious about so many things. I just want to dive deep, dig deeper into things, that how things are working. You can write Node.js program without knowing anything, which I have taught in this episode. But the beauty is to understand how things are working. What libuv is doing. That libuv repository in itself is very good at talking to operating system. This is what I have been telling you since so many episodes, isn't it? I just make this operating system and I just make this as a libuv and I just say that, okay, it is interacting. But how? Over here, there is ePOL sitting. Over there are file descriptors, FDS. There are socket descriptors, file descriptors. There are so many things. There is ePOL, there is KQ, and all of these algorithms. There is a thread pool. There is event loop which is going on. There is a call stack, and then inside V8 you have already seen there is a parsing phase. There is a parsing phase. There is an igniter. There is just-in-time compilation. So many things we have covered in this whole series. Node.js is huge, my dear friends. Huge. And if you dig deep, then there is so much you can learn inside Node.js. How amazing it is. Now, I know I'm taking a lot of time over here, but let me go back and just develop some curiosity in you. Just search for ePOL, go to the Wikipedia page. You will find out that ePOL is a Linux kernel system call. There is a syscall, okay? Now I can take a full lecture on what is a system call. If you are interested, just go and read about it. I'm not explaining this to you right now, because it will just be we will be diverted from what I was teaching. But it is basically, it is a system call for scalable IO event notification mechanism. So basically there is a event notification mechanism. Now, is there a way that operating system itself notifies us whenever there is some event, right? Suppose, at the end of the day, everything is done by operating system, right? At the operating system, at the kernel level. These are just processes. I told you, right? The one layer is hardware, right? The operating system hardware. On top of it, we have kernel. On top of it, we have processes. So most of the things happens inside that kernel, right? That kernel level. So at that kernel level, everything happens inside OS. Now there is a mechanism that can the operating system notify us whenever there is some things changed, or whenever there is some activity, whenever there is some event. This is why it is known as event-driven architecture. Now you understand, my dear friends. This is why it is known as event-driven architecture. There are event emitters, there are streams, there are pipes, there are so many things, right? If I keep explaining you, there are so many things. There are event emitters, write down all these things. Maybe if I get time, right? If I get time, I will explain about all of these things to you also, right? So what you have to read, your homework is, first of all, you should read about ePOL and KQ. Then read about FDS or socket descriptors. A little bit is also fine. Descriptors. Now also try to see that what data structure ePOL is using, right? What DS, right? Interesting questions are there, right? I mean, nobody will ask you this in your interview, but you should be curious to know, right? How it is managing the socket descriptors. You know what? ePOL mechanism just uses O of 1 to find out, right? The complexity is O of 1, right? Because it does not have a thread per connection kind of a model. No, it does not work like that, right? So I'm just telling you, but in your homework, take it down. Read about event emitters. Read about streams. Read about streams and buffers, right? Buffers, you might have heard that, okay, data is transferred in chunks, right? Data is transferred in chunks and data is transferred via streams, right? And there is an event emitter. Basically, whenever there is an event, so there is a notification mechanism. There is a emit and a listener. There is an event emitter, there is an event listener. That's how things work. That's an observer pattern. I might cover this in this course also. Maybe you will find few videos when I will cover all of it. But I am telling you, just read about it. Read about pipes also, right? Take it down as your homework. Got it? So these are the things. Please study about it. If you will go to ePOL, you will see that, okay, it was introduced in version 2.5.45 of Linux kernel. And all of these, just word about it. And then just see this, ePOL operates in O of 1 time, right? It operates in O of 1 time, right? Earlier in the older system calls before ePOL, this operation used to take O of n time. O of n time, which was slower, very slow. Okay, now it takes O1. Now, and one more amazing thing, see, ePOL uses red black tree. ePOL behind the scene uses a red black tree data structure. Now you will not understand this, right? That why it uses it. You should, so you cannot appreciate it much unless you know what ePOL is doing. So basically ePOL manages your socket descriptors and how it manages and all of it, right? If you read more about it, you will understand that. But it uses a red black tree data structure behind the scenes. This is how data structures are important. Okay, so I just wanted you to make I just want you to be curious, right? And you can read about KQ also. There is a KQ also. Where is it? There might be a KQ. So if you search for it, KQ, right? Yes, see this FreeBSD, right? FreeBSD. This KQ is also a system call, right? And it is used by, see, if you go to Wikipedia page of it, just read about it, right? It is supported in NetBSD, OpenBSD, Dragonfly BSD, Mac OS, and just read about it, right? What it is doing. But basically it is doing the same things, right? And these are the main things which are responsible, which are at the operating system level doing asynchronous IO for us. At the operating system level, these KQ and ePOL are doing asynchronous IO for all of us, right? These are event notification systems, right? Mechanism which notifies us about the events. Okay, so please go ahead, read it. And I think that's all in this video. But there are few learnings that we can take in that I want you to just know about, right? So let's move to the next slide. So the first learning is, right, there are few learnings that I have kept in for you all. Never block the main thread. And why I'm telling you learnings? Because see, now there is no end to teaching you Node.js. I can just teach you Node.js throughout my life and Node.js will not end, because there is a technology. Node.js is very huge. Deeper. The more you dig deep, the more you will be curious and the more you will feel that, okay, there is a lot more where I can dig deep, right? It's kind of like infinite loop. Okay. But I, as a teacher, want you to go 1 or 2 level deep and understand what is happening behind the scenes. That is what this course was all about. See, writing Node.js code, making server, making APIs is a easy stuff. The more complex things is how things are working behind the scenes. That is what makes you a great developer. Okay. So that is why, I have taken so many episodes. I can just move to coding. Why not? But I have taken so many episodes to teach you that how everything is working over here inside Node.js. How V8 engine works, how libuv works, how event loop works, how thread pool works, how at the operating system level works, how JS engine internally works, how memory heap works, how garbage collector works, how actually code is executed inside JavaScript engine. So many things we have covered right now, isn't it? All of this just because you can become a better developer. You will appreciate when you will write the code now, you will appreciate Node.js even more. Okay. But now I want to give you final lessons. So the first lesson is don't block your main thread. Now you understood the whole theory. Now when I say don't block the main thread, do you understand what I'm trying to say and what I'm requesting to you? Right? Please don't block the main thread. Okay. Don't block the main thread. Okay, my dear friends. How do you block the main thread? Don't use sync methods. So I have already shown you how sync methods break the flow, right? In the previous episodes, I have shown you that, okay, there was a crypto.pbkh-f2 sync method was there. Read file sync is there. So don't use sync methods. They take a tough time for JavaScript engine. They choke the JavaScript engine. So don't use it. Suppose if you are doing some heavy JSON objects, right? Suppose if you are dealing with heavy JSON objects, you are doing JSON.stringify, JSON.parse, all these on a big objects, right? It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of complexity, right? And if you do it on the main thread, it is very bad. Don't do it, right? Heavy JSON operations, don't do it. If you are doing if you are calculating some complex regex, regular expressions, it also takes a lot of time. Don't do it on the main thread. If you are doing some complex calculation, if you are running some infinite loops, or if you are running some big loops, right? Just like we were doing in crypto module, right? So if you are running some big loops, never do that on the main thread, because it will block your main thread and your program will stuck. Because you know everything now, right? Because you know, right? If you don't have your call stack empty, event loop will not be able to put any callback into the call stack. It cannot, unless the JS engine is free, unless the main thread is free, unless the main thread is idle, call stack is empty. Got it? So this is what I wanted to tell you. Now, one more thing, we understood that, okay, data structures is important. I want to give you this learning. A lot of people feel that, okay, data structures is waste of time. We don't use data structure, these, that. But you see, ePOL uses a red-black tree, right? Where is ePOL? ePOL uses a red-black tree data structure. Red-black tree data structure. Right? Now you might say that, okay, Akshay, I don't want to know what data structure it is using, but why not? You should know that. You should know how ePOL works. As a software engineer, we are very good software engineers. We should know exactly what is red-black tree. Why ePOL is using red-black tree and not something else? Why not a binary tree? Why not an array? Why? How is it able to achieve O of 1? You will only understand why is it able to achieve O of 1 when you understand the data structure behind it. Got it? Now let me tell you one more interesting thing, okay? Now when I am talking about data structures, have you seen this timers queue? I told you, right? There is a set timeout queue. This is the queue. You know what data structure is being used in the set timeout queue? In the timer queue? It uses note it down in your notebook. It uses a min heap. Right? Timers queue uses min heap. Okay. Let me just write it down also. ePOL red-black tree. And the timers queue. You know, whenever you schedule a timer, suppose if you schedule a timer for 5 seconds, schedule a timer for 10 seconds, schedule a timer for 20 seconds, schedule a timer of 30 seconds. So whenever all these things happen, so what I am trying to say is, suppose if you take example of, suppose if you write a set timeout, okay? If you write a set timeout, suppose if you are writing a set timeout and there are multiple set timeouts, okay? Suppose if there are multiple set timeouts. Right? So if this is of 5 second, 10 second, 2 second, 3 second, 8 second, and you execute this piece of code, right? I have not written the full code, but assume that there are set timeouts if you execute this piece of code. So the data structure used behind the scenes inside libuv to manage this timer queue, right? This timers, manage these timers, right? Inside the timers. Sorry, my bad. Over here, the data structure used in this timers phase, right? And this timers phase to maintain the timers, right? And over here, this timer callbacks, right? Timers, it uses a min heap. Now, what is a min heap? I'm not going to tell you. This is not a data structures class. Read it out for yourself. But min heap is a data structure. Because see, whenever there is a timer, we make a min heap is kind of like a self-balancing tree. Okay, self-balancing tree. On the top of the tree, there is always the timer which is going to expire very soon, right? The timer which is going to expire the latest is there on the top of the tree. Now, whatever I am telling you, see, if I keep telling you all these things, it will take infinite, right? There are so many amazing things inside Node.js. All these things I know because I have read a lot about Node.js. I want you to be curious and see how things are working behind the scenes inside of Node.js and all. That is when you will become a very great developer. I want all my students to know all these things and be curious, right? I just don't want to teach you Node.js or JavaScript or any of this. I want to also teach you how to become curious. I want you to love the subject that I am teaching you. I want you to love Node.js when you are using it. Okay? Hope you are falling in love with Node.js more and more. Right? Now, the third important learning is naming is very important. Now, let me tell you a funny example. If you will go to, right, there is a funny thing. If you'll go to Node.js website, Node.js official documentation, over here, just search for process.nextTick vs set immediate. Just read this paragraph and you will laugh. Just read this paragraph and you will laugh. So what is process.nextTick? Okay. So now naming is very important. An example is process.nextTick vs process.nextTick vs set immediate. I'll tell you what do I mean by it. Naming is very important. So see, now what happens is there is an event loop. Okay, this is an event loop. Now what do you mean by a tick? I told you one cycle of the event loop is known as a tick, right? One cycle of event loop is known as a tick. So when I say process.nextTick, what does it mean? What does it mean? This process.nextTick should mean that, okay, whatever callback I pass to it should happen in the next tick, right? Process.nextTick. So this callback should run in the next tick. But what happens it, whenever you do any process.nextTick, it happens immediately. It happens immediately, isn't it? Because see, this process.nextTick is called before every phase, isn't it? Process.nextTick is called before every phase. So it happens immediately. Process.nextTick happens immediately. And what about set immediate? And set immediate should happen immediately, but set immediate happens in the next tick. Right? So basically, process.nextTick and set immediate is a very confusing topic, right? They both things are very complex to understand. Because see, set immediate means that, okay, it will happen in the next tick, and the process.nextTick means that it happens immediately, right? So their namings are messed up. And it is so messed up that even the official Node.js documentation says that it is messed up, right? In the essence, names should be swapped, right? Process.nextTick should be set immediate, and set immediate should be doing the work of process.nextTick, isn't it? The names should have been swapped. Because you understood, right, what I'm trying to say? The process.nextTick happens immediately, and set immediate happened in the next tick. Right? So this is a funny thing. I laughed out loud when I read it first, right? I was like, oh my God, this is such a blunder. And this is why developers are not able to understand actually what is happening in the next tick, what is happening in the set immediate, because the naming is not correct. And even the official documentation, this is Node.js.org, accepts it. The name should be swapped. Process.nextTick fires more immediately than set immediate. Now, they say that, okay, this is the mistake that they have done in past and it is unlikely to change. Why it cannot change? Why Node.js cannot change it? Because if Node.js changes how this works, if Node.js changes how this event loop works, then a lot of libraries and so many code, so much code, the Node.js is so popular that there are millions and billions of repository working on Node.js would fail. People would have used nextTick for something, set immediate for something, right? And everything will be a blunder. So now Node.js cannot change this. Node.js cannot change all of it now because it will be a blunder. When they would have been developing, then it is kind of like a mistake, right? See this, making this switch would break large percentage of packages on NPM. Every day, more and more new node modules are being added. which means every day we wait, more potential breakage occur. While they are confusing, the names themselves will never change, they won't change. And Node.js also recommends that we recommend developers to use set immediate in all cases because it's easier to reason about. So Node.js says that don't use process.nextTick. Don't use in your code, always use set immediate. Just for the sake of not messing things up. Okay, now, and the next thing is why use process.nextTick? Read about it, right? There is a lot more to read in the documentation. It's a long thing. You should read about it. Take your own time. But I am telling you that one learning that we can take away is that naming variable is very important. Even big libraries and frameworks like Node.js makes mistake, right? The mistake of nextTick and set immediate. Naming is very important. And I would like to end this video with the last learning that there is a lot to learn. I can keep teaching, keep going inside, and I can reach. See, we started from the Node.js. Then we went more deep. And I have explained you till the level of kernel. That what happens at the kernel level. What is epoll, what is sockets, and a little bit I have explained. So learning, and let me tell you, if you ask me, I am not an expert at Node.js. I can't say myself as an expert because there is so much more that even if I today go start reading more about Node.js, I find so many new things because it is also being developed actively. Right? There are new things which are coming up in Node.js. There are new things which are coming up in libuv. There are new things which are coming up in V8 engine. There are new things happening inside at the kernel level, and our ecosystem is evolving. So there is a lot to learn. Being a software developer has just made me humble. More and more humble that I don't know anything. The more I learn, the more I know that I don't know anything. This is the last lesson I want to end this episode with. And hope you are enjoying Namaste Node series. If you are enjoying Namaste Node series, my dear friends, please write about Namaste Node on social media. Maybe share your learnings from this episode on social media, on your Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on any social media that you use. Please share about Namaste Node to your friends, family, and all your social media network. That would help us reach more and more developers. Please do that. And my mission is to make you fall in love with Node.js. Hope you are fallen in love with Node.js. Have you fallen in love with Node.js or not? Please let me know. Please email to me. Please write it on Discord. Please write it on social media and tag me along. I want to know whether you have fallen in love with Node.js or not. Are you liking my teaching style? Are you liking Node.js? Give me a feedback. And please, thank you so much for watching this video. I know these are very theoretical videos. These are more complex topics which I am covering right now, but soon we are going to start building projects, start writing code and all of that. Then it will be a lot more fun, even more fun than this, right? So that's all in this video, my dear friends. Please, I request you once again to please share a word about Namaste Node on social media. It helps us reach more people, and please do that. All this, whatever I have told you, whatever I have taught you, takes a lot of time to prepare and a lot of time to build all this knowledge. So please, it would help us reach more people, and that would be a great help for us. Thank you so much. This is the day when I wanted to teach all of this, and I have taught the libuv, right? I will not cover much of libuv now. I will try to move on to write code and all the important stuff, right? So that's all in this video, my dear friend. See you once again in the next episode. Till then, bye-bye. All the best. Wish you the best for your interviews, and stay healthy, stay happy, and earn a lot of money, my dear friends. Bye-bye.